What's up, guys? This is Atulio and Vishwa from the Raving Critic, and today we'll be talking about the most awaited movie of 2022, Avatar 2. So let's talk about Avatar 2. So, was it worth the hype, Avatar 2? Let's get into it. So, how'd you feel about Avatar 2, Vishwa?
Right, so the hype. How long has it been? 13 years since the
Yeah, it's
first
13
movie,
years.
right?
Yeah.
2009, Avatar 1 came out, and for its day and age, it was leading in terms of VFX graphics. It was all new technology. James Cameron had invented a lot of new sort of ways for his cinematography, right? And now we've been waiting forever. 2022, 13 years later, we have Avatar 2, The Way of Water. And I feel like, again, to just throw out the pros here. He delivered on the graphics again. The cinematography was insane. Um the visual experience, the audience's experience when they're watching the movie was top notch. And on the flip side, the con was the storyline. And I think you could build off on this, but the storyline was pretty weak compared to Avatar 1, right? Avatar 1's storyline was much more intricate, and it might also be because that was a first of its kind. This kind of like the introduction of these avatars, the blue people, this entire the technology behind what was happening in the movie, how they're able to like transfer the soul into another physical form, et cetera, et cetera. It was all new. Maybe it's because we're used to this kind of sort of unique movie ideas, and therefore Avatar 2 looked a little basic in terms of storyline. Yeah, so what do you think
Well,
for the storyline?
okay, the storyline was definitely weak because I feel that the first one had a little bit more to it, where you have like Jake, and then he has this own like world, like he has his own inner conflict where he's like, how do I transition from like this whole like military lifestyle or like being like a human, and like I think the story takes place around like the far future, so it doesn't take place around
Yeah,
our time, it takes place during the far future, right?
yeah,
2100s or something, right? And what it shows in the first movie is, in the first few sequences of the movie, it shows Jake is not really happy with his human life because he's paralyzed from the waist down. Other aspect to why the movie was lagging when it comes to the storyline is the differences between the villain. Like for example, what do you think about the villain in this movie?
so I
Same
think
villain,
yeah, building off of that
Quarterich.
context.
Yeah,
Yeah, building off the first one, right? We got to see it was sort of like a human joins the Navi people, and he realizes that the humans, what they're doing is wrong. They're reaping the resources of these people, and
yeah.
therefore it turns. And so we see that the difference between the humans and the Navi people. In Avatar 2, everyone seems to be the Navi people, right? Everyone's converted. The entire film is just following it, except that one, the human child. Other than him, the entire film is just the Navi people. And so the enemies, and the enemies and the good people, you could say, they both don't seem to have much of differences. They're both powerful in the sense that they both have the powers that the Navi people originally possessed. And so it sort of created this like equal battleground, which is I wouldn't say that's bad, but I feel like it sort of took away the entire hype that the first movie gave us, because the second movie, it was sort of just a back and forth, and they were using all this technology to track down the Navi people, and at certain points, it even felt like one side had an unfair advantage in terms of their technology, while the others had never seen anything like this before. You know, like the way they were murdering those the creatures in the water using their high technology. They were geopositioning, whatever they were doing, all that technology just to track down on them, and and then all of a sudden, in the end, the Navi people decide, all right, it's time to revolt, and then they attack back. And so my it was more of a question of like, why did they wait that long if they were ready to sort of go at it? I feel like the story was the movie was extended without reason for a bit too long. I mean, it was, the film was over 3 hours long, and
Oh yeah.
I would say it was unnecessarily long. And this entire the enemy and like the protagonist, I feel like they dragged it out too far, and it sort of gave a very a little boredom in terms of the fight itself. So that's what I think about the enemy in the situation.
Well, I think also too, like for example, I think that the no doubt that the performances were great, whether it be from Corderich, I mean, like all the other characters. The spider guy was like kind of cool too,
Mhm.
but kept dragging it at one point, and they thought that they were kind of doing a cat and mouse chase between Corderich and then Jake's
Exactly. Yeah.
family. But then when you extend that cat and mouse chase for like 3.5, well, I mean 3 hours and like 5 minutes, then it kind of becomes a little bit laggy. One point, it was kind of it was kind of predictable how the ending
Exactly.
was going
I
to
mean,
be. So it just
obviously,
kind of I kind of lost interest.
exactly. Because again, it was predictable. I feel like after a point, you knew that like there was a point where it almost looked like they were gonna go at peace, like the enemy, the Colonel and Jake Sully, and you almost knew as the audience that like there's no way they're about to just make peace and end the movie there. You knew there was gonna be some sort of switch that goes off, and then like Sully. I mean, I don't want to say like in every movie the protagonist just has to win the fight, but like in this specific case, and like in most cases, you kind of know at what point the protagonist is finally going to revolt and take victory. And we had that scene in when Jake Sully took down his enemy, protected his family. He did it for his family, which was the sort of message that the director was trying to convey to us. And on the same note, for Spider, the human child, the Colonel was also family to him. And so I feel like it was actually a very unique and like creative idea
Yeah, it
for
was
him to
creative.
just out of nowhere to the audience. It was a shock where he just, after all that effort, we take down the Colonel. And this guy comes out of nowhere and he's like, I need to save my dad. And then he sort of drags him to the side and like saves him. And I feel like that also might be because um we are like James Cameron has already filmed Avatar 3, and I feel like he needed to leave this guy alive for him to continue the story because he is the main villain, and I feel like we're going to see him in the next movie as well. And that was the entire point of sort of having that little scene there for us to just, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of the audience would have found that interesting or maybe disappointing or whatever, but
No, you know what's interesting? You know the scene before that, right? Natre has like a knife against Spider, and then Colonel has like a knife against Sully's kid, right? So
yeah.
then he's like, "Hey, Sully, I'm gonna give you your kid, but we gotta fight." And what happens is Nitre is like, "Oh, well, I have your kid." And then he's like, "Oh, I don't care about him. He's not even. He's a human. He's a different species either way."
Mhm.
Thing is, right when she's about to do it, he's like, "All right, I give up." But it shows you, like, I like how James Cameron was talking about the idea of family, unity,
Exactly.
community, and theme.
I
Even
mean,
just that, it's not about Jake Sully's family. Think about the water people. Think about the environment and stuff. So protecting the things and your belongings and people around
I
you.
want to go back to the main pros of this movie is the graphics and the cinematography.
Yeah, for sure.
James Cameron, he's known for this, right? And he's delivered. I would not say he disappointed, especially for people who choose to watch this movie in like a 3D or 4D format where they're like, the entire idea of full immersion with the movie. They have the water spraying on them, all that. It probably elevates the movie because I personally watched it in standard format and it still was beautiful, right? And you kind of think like, how is he able to pull this off? And when you look into it deeper, I found out about how he oftentimes he has ideas beyond the technology that's available, and so he'll go out of his way to invent his own technology, have that innovation for him to be able to deliver um the sort of visuals that he puts on the screen. And it's also sort of I'll say kind of justifies the 13 years that he took on this movie, and sort of he just dedicated his entire life to Avatar, Avatar 1, 2, 3, I believe 4, 5, 6. I don't know how far it goes, but like that's how far it's projected to go. So yeah, the graphics is really where this movie shines. And
No, especially the underwater sequences. The underwater sequences are so beautiful, especially with the whales. With she there was a scene where Nitrate and the two girls are going under, and you see all the chloral, you see like the lights, the visuals are
yeah,
amazing, the set pieces. everything is just
He didn't lack. He didn't
beautiful.
lack on no details were missed. I'd say something he did say for this specific meeting in one of his interviews or one of his speeches is that if Avatar does not make enough money in terms of box office, they actually cannot afford to continue making the avatars, right?
Yeah.
And because that's how much it's costing them. And when we look in terms of box office, right? Look in terms of box office, Avatar one think it's one. I think it either one of the or it is the highest grossing movie of all time, right? 2.9 billion. I think
Yeah.
it was almost 3 billion.
Almost 3
And
billion.
yeah, so I recently looked at the Avatar 2 box office so far, and I think they're shy of 900 million. They're almost there. And I'm sure they're definitely gonna surpass 1 billion. But in terms of box office, do you think this movie has what it takes to get to sort of the Avatar one, like what the record that it's set? Do you think this will?
So on the first week, a lot of people actually did not know that the Avatar 2 movie was actually releasing. So what's going to happen is a lot of people that are hearing like good reviews from Avatar 2, they're going to come in. So people are going to come in more.
Yeah,
I think, like I said, I can't make a prediction, but it's possible that Avatar 2 could surpass Avatar 1.
I think okay, so I didn't really think about that. Maybe the day or the time of the year that they chose to release this movie was very smart, and it might have been because of from a business standpoint, because the Avatar, the first one was also released on in December, actually very nearby. I think the first one was released in like December, like maybe 3 days before Avatar 2 was released. I think that was it was a very small difference, and maybe that was on purpose, right? Because like you mentioned, in January and even in December, there's like no movies. I feel like people going to the theaters, if they were to look at their options, Avatar 2 is probably going to be consistently the first option that people are going to like deviate towards in terms of they're going to be looking at a list of movies and what's coming out, like Megan, that's one of the movies coming out. The Tom Hanks movie is some other like smaller movies like Puss in Boots and all this, and like those aren't really competition for Avatar. And some people might not even know about Avatar, like you said. And so when they look at it and see that it's playing in theaters, they might be like, oh, and then go ahead and watch it. And so I think that they do have another like month or so in terms of collection, box office collection. But I don't think they have what Avatar 1 had in terms of just sort of substance for them to. I don't think they have the momentum to hit 3 billion. Maybe they'd surpass like, I don't want to put any projections out there because it's kind of hard to predict the financials, especially because obviously the movie ticket prices and the movie goers, and there's a lot that's different in the past decade, right?
Yeah.
It's been 13 years, so there is that, but I do think they can surpass 2 billion, but not do as well in terms of box office as Avatar 1. And it would be like everyone should go and watch this movie. But
Yeah, everybody should. Everybody must go and watch the movie.
exactly.
Whether regardless of the flaws of the story, regardless of like the screenplay issues, or regardless of like, like the characters, Tar movies or any of like, I don't know, like older James Cameron movies, you're gonna go and look at like, oh man, this is like actually a good watch. This is like fun, entertaining. So yeah, I think it's in
Exactly.
that sense. I think like professional critics, they might look at this and be like, oh well, this character is off, the screenplay is off. Like, yes, there are issues with it, but I still think that it's still a great watch.
Yeah, because like okay, yeah, the like sort of deep and very like analytical critics are obviously gonna note like
Yeah.
the like oh he missed this in the storyline and this actor was casted incorrectly and all that. But
Yeah.
no raving critic, we're just here to like let the audience know is like whether the 3 hours or 2 hours that they go to the theater to watch a movie is the movie worth the 2 to 3 hours. This movie is worth the 3 hours given the flaws we've mentioned and the pros we've mentioned. In the end, it is a movie that you just have to watch because it's just again an important part in the sort of and a unique part of all the movies that have come out in history. And like yeah, like many people might not have even watched the first one. And I think like I don't want to sort of jump to conclusions, but this might actually be a movie that you could technically watch without having to watch the first one, just because The graphics is mainly what you're going there for, and
Well, especially for family audiences and like people like maybe for us and people like that are really into like movies, like I don't know, young people, they might
Mhm,
like
mhm.
need to watch part one and they want to look at
Yeah,
story more analytically,
right.
critiques. But if you're just trying to look for a family entertainer, like you don't really need to look at the old movie. You can just kind of look at this movie, kind of look like, oh, there's a villain, there's a hero,
Yeah,
there's a fight. That's how like the biggest movies work, the biggest blockbusters work.
that does remind me. One of the main things about the first one and the second one is the introduction of new characters, right? So now Jake has a new family. I think he has three or four. He has four kids, maybe three
Yeah.
kids of his own. I don't know. And then there's also the human child, the colonel's
Spider.
son,
Yeah.
Spider, yeah,
Spider. Yeah.
the colonel's son, and obviously all the water people. There's the introduction of many characters, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like expands the entire the world of Pandora. So, what did you think about the introduction of the new characters and their purpose in the movie?
Well, I thought that the new characters were like, it's kind of cool to see that, like, in the first movie, you follow Jake Sully's story. And then in the second one, you do, but then you also see the other characters have their own arcs where you see the younger brother, right? The younger brother, he always wants to be in the position of his father, but he always keeps messing up. His father has to give him rules and restrictions. He's always combative. The older brother's he's a bit more mature. He can handle himself, but he dies in the end, right? No
Right.
spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then what happens is the girl, she figures out the little girl doesn't really have a character arc, but
Mm.
the older sister, she kind of has her own, like, thing going on. So it just shows you the different characters. I felt that they could have developed a little bit more on that. It was just very surface level. I do like the characters. I like Spider's character, his like conflict with his dad, and it shows despite him being human, he'll still support the
Mhm.
Navi. He'll support Jake's family.
I also don't remember. Like, do you happen to remember how long the first movie was?
The first movie was around 3 hours too, right?
Yeah.
It was around
Okay.
three
Well,
hours.
okay. In that case, because like if that one you couldn't like, it actually kind of had a reason to be 3 hours long. I don't know if it was 3 hours long, but even if it was, I'm sure you wouldn't have noticed it because it had more of a storyline. And this one was just kind of just stretched
Well,
and
because you're building off of, well, actually the first one was actually 2 hours and 45 minutes.
okay. So I feel like that 20 minutes could have been saved in this movie as well.
Yeah, because this one
Maybe
was like
more.
3 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay, so
Like,
it's even longer than we thought it was. Yeah, so I feel like even like maybe half an hour could have been saved if we cut out the random sort of side stories of like the whales and the I mean I'll say that I
well,
guess
here's the thing: the whale like literally like kicks the boat off. Right? There's a scene where the
I'm
whale just
yeah, I'm
comes.
gonna be honest that the action scene of the whale and him using
Yeah, that's why.
his
No, it just felt really artificial how the whale can like feel, and he's like doing like weird like hand signs, and like I understand the whole like you do certain signs for like animals to speak, but it just felt so like kind of like, oh my god, I knew this would happen.
the end I think in conclusion that the 3 hours and 15 minutes
Yeah.
is another you can add it to the list of cons, I guess. So the storyline it comes back to the storyline. It was unnecessarily long. I feel like some parts of it weren't necessary. Like you said, we ended up with a 3 hour 15 minute movie. Toss in the ads that the theaters do, and you're going to be spending about like three, maybe depending on when you get to the theater, you might just be at the theater for 4 hours just to watch Avatar.
Imagine you have four people, you're basically spending $75 and AMC too.
Exactly.
Imagine.
If you
Okay, I understand for this movie why you would see it with your family, but imagine like nowadays in general, like spending like $75 for a movie
yeah, and
and
depending
a
on
3 hour
format,
movie.
yeah, depending on what format, like I feel like a movie like this is sort of meant to be watched in certain formats, like you would want to watch in 40. And if we wanted to talk about ticket prices, like what $25 for a ticket to watch in 40 plus taxes, it's going to be running you over $100 for the average family. And so I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to answer the question of what is it worth the ticket prices, but it's definitely worth watching. I'll leave it at that.